And I think for like long-term success in the sport, for longevity, the passion has to be there. You have to not just do it for the prize money or the glory of qualifying for one race, but you have to be in it for the long term. You have to love the trails, you have to love nature and the environment, and wanting to do those long, ultra long, weekend long runs and suffer out there in 100 miles. So it helps to be fit for both, but I think anyone could do any surface, any distance if they want to. I'd check 1, 2.
Yeah, you guys are. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2.
Good.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming to the first ever live audience podcast, hosted by Camelback and partnered with Method 7. Today, my guest is Sage Canaday. He is probably one of the best known ultra runners in the North America. Has been in the sport at a professional level for 10 years? Yep, 10. That's like a very long career in the sport for people who haven't been doing it that long. And has, not only has he been a pro the whole time, but he's been very consistent. Excuse the truck in the background. I love to ask this question because, you have a following, you have an audience that knows you, but how would you describe yourself to the community?
I'm not sure about being one of the most well-known in North America. Thanks for the compliment there. But part of it's being a social media addict, I'd say. I've always had a passion for videos, even as a little kid running around Oregon. I grew up in rural Oregon with a camcorder. Back then it was a full-on VHS tape. But I love videos. In college, I got right on YouTube and Facebook right when they came out, basically. So I've always been active on social media, and it's a great way, I think, to connect with a global audience, even outside of the sport of running. Whether your hobby is disc golf or craft beer drinking or coffee or traveling, you could find a niche on social media, and I think that's really cool. So part of me is a social media personality, video person on YouTube and coach. And then the other part is competitive running. And of course, I started, like you, running in college, running track, and then doing some road running before I found mountain ultra trail running.
How did you find mountain ultra trail running?
I was working at a running store in Michigan at Hansons Brooks. I was teammates with Desi Linden back then, running marathons, and I picked up, I think it was Running Times or Runner's World, and there was Killian Jornet was on the cover. Around the same time, I also read the book Born to Run. And so I knew about Western States, I knew about Leadville, I knew about some of these races, but I hadn't really thought about doing races longer than 26.2 miles and being on the trails. And I was like, that looks really fun. That looks really cool. He's running in these beautiful landscapes, and they're doing these 100-mile races. It seemed like a new challenge to try.
Yeah. And what would you say, you were, as you said, part of the Hansons project, so deep in the road running world. What were those differences that you saw in the trail running, not only community, not only race atmosphere, but also, the style of racing? You say any race, any distance, that's your, or any terrain, any distance, that's, kind of what you're known for and known for as a coach. What did you see in trail running back then when you were with Hansons, and what was that appeal?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Hansons Brooks is a post-collegiate Olympic development road marathon program. Mm-hmm. So right out of college, I was sponsored by them, just focused on half marathon and marathon. It's all, road marathons are great, I still love them, but it's all the same. You're running through a major city, a big city marathon.
Yeah.
It's relatively flat, even Boston or New York is relatively flat compared to a trail race. And it's just single-mindedly, similar training programs, not a ton of hill repeats, not a ton of vertical. Road running, they're generally worried about twisting their ankle if you go on any sort of gravel path or anything that, it's either you hike or you road run or track run. So for me, getting onto technical trails was a huge difference, and it was kind of that shift in mindset of where maybe you grew up hiking in the forest or in the mountain trails, and you always thought, okay, that's where I go hike. now I'm going to run. I'm going to start running these same trails, and I could cover a bigger distance on foot, and I could carry a lot of gear in my camelback and, explore different places and meet like-minded individuals who are into like running these extreme distances with totally different sports backgrounds or getting into running later in life. And it's really cool. So the mindset was really about pushing your limits, finding your own sense of self, but also being able to run up a cool mountain and enjoy the view rather than just pounding the pavement all the time.
Yeah. And in the last 10 years, how have you, because we both know it has, seen the sport evolve?
It's grown a lot, I'd say, like just in the North American scene, but also worldwide. There's a lot more companies coming in with new innovative products. You see, different pack designs, different sunglass designs, different shoe designs, different shoe brands even getting into the space. And then, I mean, some of the lotteries are harder to get into.
Yeah.
That's definitely a struggle, but it's also a cool thing because it means more people are enjoying the outdoors, embracing the sport. As an elite sponsored runner, I've been really lucky. There's been a lot of good travel opportunities.
Yeah.
It's a way to see beautiful mountain ranges across the world. So there's a lot of support that way. And then with the rise of social media, I'd say just, getting on different platforms, you could find kind of your niche, whether it's podcasting or doing YouTube videos or even doing TikTok videos or something like that.
I always say, I don't know if you had this experience, but when I first got into trail running was about 10 years ago. Here in California, and my runs were like all with people double my age, all men double my age who, drank beer, like got super drunk every night after runs, and it's not the high performance culture that it is now. And, now and I think it's kind of cool, because I feel that same spirit as I felt, running collegiately, but without the parts of it that I didn't like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still drinking beer here, but there's
and not knocking it. That was fun. And that's why I got into it. Like I ran a 50K and then I would party with these guys.
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, there is more diversity in the sport.
Yeah.
It's growing slowly, especially with younger runners coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of these up and coming pro runners, especially like just out of school, and maybe they're 18 or in their early 20s. And I'm always hearing new names, people getting into running later in life from different backgrounds that maybe played totally different sports, or they were into hiking or mountain biking, and now they're trail running too. So you're seeing that. You're seeing more women in the sport, and hopefully, I mean, still a long ways to go, but there has been a good push, I'd say, especially recently, for making it a little more equal with not just, it's not just a certain group of guys, but we're trying to be more inclusive and open up that community. And I've met a lot of new runners, so it's really cool.
Yeah. Do you see younger collegiate athletes who are looking to go that pro route, choosing trail running over track and road right now?
I've been a little out of touch with the younger generations, but I've definitely seen that. There's been a few examples where whether it's trying to like make a U.S. national team in mountain running at the youth level, there's more opportunities to do that now.
Yeah.
Or even like college programs like at Western State out in Gunnison, Colorado, there's like some runners that come from that program where they maybe didn't want to run the traditional route of track and cross country in college, but they could join a club trail running team or just go out in high school or college and have a nature class and run on the trails. So you do see some of those, the next generation coming in directly into the sport. And one of the opportunities I had was making the U.S. mountain running team was actually my first introduction to mountain ultra trail running. And that was a huge draw because you get to represent your country, you get to travel internationally. You got Team USA gear, and it was really cool. I knew I couldn't make it on the track or the road marathon because I was a little too slow. So being able to find that I enjoyed climbing up hills actually was really refreshing. Yeah.
Do you think that's just going to continue to be people who, maybe won't make it as a pro and track and road that transition to trail? Or do you think there will be that specific goal or that specific skill set that maybe they would be an Olympian as a track athlete or marathoner? Do you think but might not be great at the trails? Do you think that's the case, or do you think like in running, an Olympian is an Olympian, and they might translate to the trails really well.
Well, hopefully in the distant future or near future, they make mountain ultra trail running an Olympic sport. They're already making skimo an Olympic sport, so it would be cool to see that. I think part of it's a little bit of a self-selection bias too. So, it's not always the fastest road marathoner runner that wins the race, right? Sometimes the 2:15 guy beats the 2:08 guy, or the 2:30 guy beats the 2:20 guy. So like, Kilian Jornet could go out and run a 29-minute 10K. That's pretty fast, right? And there's a lot of fast road marathon runners that I think if they tried ultras, they do really well, but there's no guarantees. There's a lot of problem solving, especially with the 100-mile ultras. And I think for like long-term success in the sport, for longevity, the passion has to be there. You have to not just do it for the prize money or the glory of qualifying for one race, but you have to be in it for the long term. You have to love the trails, you have to love nature and the environment, and wanting to do those ultra long, weekend long runs and suffer out there in 100 miles. So it helps to be fit for both, but I think anyone could do any service, any distance if they want to.
Speaking of 100 miles, I know your experience has been turbulent. I'm just so curious to hear about that. And, you're such a good 50-mile, 100K runner, and, 50K too, really anything. But you've run into some trouble in the 100. What do you think that difference is, and where, so a lot of it has been bad luck, but what do you think it is the reason where you keep having that roadblock in that 100-mile distance?
Yeah, I mean, hundreds are a different beast. As you know, you've had great success out here winning hundreds, and I've suffered a bit. I did Western States out here once. I was looking at the track over there in the run, and I was like, man, I really struggled to get to that finish line, but I did it. I'd say, part of it, maybe my best event really was or is 50K or 50 miles, but I still think there's room to improve at 100s. I think some people maybe take longer to adapt, and part of the struggle with hundreds is there's just more time, more variables that could go exponentially wrong. If you don't dress for the weather, if you don't hydrate, if you don't pace yourself well. Part of it's I've gone full tilt into some of these hundreds. Like it's either like UTMB or Western here, or Run Rabbit Run, I guess is the other one I tried. And I'll just try to, it's all or nothing, and then I go out too fast and don't pace myself and pay the price. You also don't get as many chances at hundreds sometimes. I only pick like one a year top, so I think you have less chances. Whereas if you're running the half marathon, you could do that every month. But some of it could be genetic, some of it could be just tinkering with training and problem solving better, I'd like to think.
I think so. For me, I'm, of the mindset that like, if you're a good runner, you can be a good 100-mile runner. So like for you, like I think it just hasn't clicked yet, and I think it will. But what are some of those, let's say 3 lessons that you've learned from some of your past hundreds that, you can point to and be like, that's why it didn't work out. And that was not like a circumstantial thing. This was a user error that you can take to your next 100 or tell the people who are running tomorrow at Canyons 100K.
I feel like you should be given the tips on this, but you could add in after I say mine.
But it is important to know, to learn what not to do more than what to do in 100.
Yeah, the ones I suffered greatly in Western States here especially was getting massively dehydrated. And part of it was pacing. I was going too fast for the conditions and my training. I underestimated the canyons, so started off too fast, and that happens in my other ones. So pacing, go out a little slower than you expect, especially that first 30 miles. And then I was drinking probably too much plain water in a lot of them, or not enough water. And I tend to sweat really salty. So I think I write down a rough plan of how many milligrams of sodium I think I should be drinking an hour. I look at, what product is going to be at the aid stations, and not just how much sodium I'm taking or how many calories an hour I'm taking, but how much fluid am I actually taking? Am I downing both of my half-liter soft flasks in my Camelback vest? Am I, is it a liter an hour? Is it a liter and a half hour? Sometimes it was less than that. So I've gotten massively dehydrated, which led to the stomach issues. But you could also say that's from going out too fast too, because you get less blood flow to your GI tract.
Yeah.
So mainly it's that nutrition and pacing problem, I'd say was the number one thing I suffered with.
Yeah. It's so funny because you're wearing those sunglasses that you're wearing, they're called the closer. And we name them after that like last little bit in a race. Because for me, a successful ultra is one that you're like closing really hard. You feel really good. And that takes being so stupidly, frustratingly conservative in the beginning. But there's like no better feeling than closing hard in 100. It's like so raw. And it does. I've gotten screwed. We both DNF Run Rabbit run in 2016. You were in the truck when they picked me up from both of us going out too fast.
I was so out of it. I don't even remember that. I was delirious. It's the middle of the night on the highest point on the Run Rabbit run course. It's freezing cold. It was like 15 degrees.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, why don't you share an example of you closing fast in 100, like maybe here or one of the other ones?
Oh my God. Here
won?
Was a great one because I came into Green Gate and Magda was right behind me, Magdalena Bollet, who had won a couple years before. And I was running with my pacer and my then roommate, Ryan Smith, who basically like, I had another coach at the time, but he did almost 100% of my training with me, making me like wear black wool long sleeve shirts, and he told me to turn off my headlamp, and there's one point where I started to hike and he looked at me and said, "You're better than that." And I didn't hike another step in that race except for that one like little cement hill when you get off the trail, and I thought I was all done. But like if for those of you racing tomorrow, this podcast comes the day before Canyon's 100K and the 100 miler is currently going on right now. Don't get caught up in the start. That is, people look at my Western states and they say that is a well-paced 100 because it was so competitive that year and there was so much snow. I was like, I'm just going to take it easy until I get to Forest Hill. And, for you guys, the race doesn't start till mile 40 for the 100K. So really feel that and know that if you feel good at mile 40, you are going to pass people. And that is fun. That is really fun. Hence the huntress. I like to go hunting at the end of ultras. But, through your career, you've, I love following your career. Even as your friend, as someone who's known you for like 8 years or so, I've been a fan because you have such extreme highs and lows, which I do too, And through all of that, you remain so confident in yourself and sure, and like, it's rightfully so. It's true. And how do you hold that when you're feeling like shit because you're in the hospital, and you just, we're told you have a heart issue or something?
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, I had a pulmonary embolism bilateral 2 years ago, so blood clots in both my lungs, and I had it for like 5 weeks. Did a little bit of damage. It was misdiagnosed for a while. Recovered from that, and then a couple months later, our house or apartment in Boulder caught on fire and burned to the ground. So we lost pretty much everything in that fire. So it's kind of a rough year. But everyone goes through life. I mean, hopefully you don't have anything too bad, but like at some point in life, like we all have our little ups and downs or big ups and downs. And so, it's kind of a thing that everyone has to experience. And if you don't experience it in life, you're going to experience it during a long ultra, probably the ups and downs. So it's kind of a metaphor for life. And I guess having the confidence, knowing that when you're down, things will pick up eventually, and you'll be back on top again. So there's always some good that can come out of the struggle, and facing that adversity, I think makes us better people. Hopefully, could strengthen our willpower and give us other tools, and maybe you have to change directions in life. Like I knew, as a competitive athlete, getting older, like you're only going to be at like the tip pinnacle of your VO2 max for so long, right? Like pro track and road runners, people would say like, you're pretty old after you're like in your 30s, right? But in ultra running, I think there's a lot more longevity, actually. I've met several people who are in their 70s who are going to go out there and run the ultras tomorrow. So it's really inspiring to see. It's a lifelong sport. So there's a lot of upside still, even if you struggle with something.
Yeah. And, do you find during these lows that these goals are something that you have to struggle to stay focused on? Or do you feel like it is grounding you in like the chaos?
A little bit of both.
Yeah,
definitely a little bit of both. And I think most people probably feel that way.
Yeah, totally.
So you just kind of like try to flip that switch and focus on the positive when you can.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever struggled with burnout or anything like imposter syndrome, which is, something I didn't even know that word existed. And then I heard it and I was like, oh, that's me.
Well, with burnout, it gets hard if you get an injury, for example, or you're training really hard and then you get sick or something. But it could also happen if you race too frequently, right? Like it's actually more than just mental burnout. It's like a physical burnout where you push too hard for too long. So I've definitely experienced that. Like probably there was one year, I think 2013, I did like 8 ultras in a year, and they were all like pretty competitive ultras, like Bandera, Lake Sonoma, Tarawera, Cayuga Trails, Speed Goat, Pikes Peak, and North Face here.
Oh my God.
Le Templier. Yeah, that was a big year. And when you look back on that, you're like, that was probably a little bit too much. And I was lucky I didn't get injured, but I also didn't always perform as well as I could have if I had rested more. And then, the next year it might affect you. So you do have to pace yourself. It's you want to sign up for all these cool events, but like
I know.
when you look at the big picture, it's good to have a general framework and plan. Like, can I pull that off?
Yeah. It's so cool to talk to you because I feel like in talking to so many other pro athletes or any athlete in general, I was talking to an athlete that I coach about this morning, that, ultra running is so mental and that, your mind plays tricks on you. You have trouble with confidence. But in every time I've tried to like search for that answer in you're like, no, it's a different. You're like, yeah, it's hard. I race too much. And that's where the burnout came from. I really appreciate that because it's simple. It's A plus B equals C, Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's quite that simple, but there's some nuance there, some gray areas. But it could be as simple as complex as you want it to be. But it's what keeps things interesting, the constant struggle. Yeah,
totally. And I'm not saying it's easy for anyone, but I'm saying that in the way that you talk about it, you do simplify it, It's pretty, I like the way you've stripped these questions down to logic, and that's an easy answer for, people who are racing these and it gets really hard. For myself, I'm like, oh, if I'm overly emotional, even if it's happiness, I need food immediately, and that is how I've tried to logic my way into success. But it's hard because my mental ups and downs are maybe a little bit more frequent. So you're also known for being a very good and enthusiastic brand partner, which I think is good for the industry because people get an honest brand relationship, and it's worked for your partners. Like you've had long relationships with your partners. Can you tell me a little bit what that means to you and how that's evolved throughout your career? When did you sign with Hoka, first of all?
9 years ago with Hoka.
9?
So I've been really fortunate to have long-term partners. 3 years with Camelback
3
now.
Years, that
really
was my
appreciate
second question.
their support.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see that. I feel very fortunate. I think part of it's just kind of luck, and then being active on social media is a really cool way to help your sponsors, but also just to engage with the community, especially on the international scene. So for me, it's kind of just a natural thing. It's rewarding, and it's something I really want to do and something I really value. And the partnerships have been amazing. It's empowered me to run at a pro level and travel around the world and meet a bunch of cool people. So I've been really lucky with that.
Yeah.
I value loyalty a lot too. So like sticking with Hoka, it's been really good. I've been really lucky.
Yeah.
And I like kind of the business side of things. I like the marketing, creative media type of things. So it's kind of just a natural fit.
So like in a brand like Camelback, which 3 years in this sport, that is a long contract. But you started with them, well into your career. How do you decide on a brand like that? Because you could really have your choice of the litter when it comes to pack sponsors. Like, how do you determine the gear that you need, which one you like best, and negotiate those partnerships by yourself? Because you're not represented by an agent, right?
Oh, no. Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is liking the brand's values, I'd say. So, like, even as a little kid growing up, my first hydration apparatus was a Camelback. I remember riding mountain bikes when I was like 5 years old, and I had like the old school like 1990 Camelback reservoir on, and that was my first introduction to like actually carrying hydration on a bike ride or run. And so it's cool to come back to that now, like 25 years later, 30 years later. How old's the brand? How old am I? No. So the other thing is, like, when you're introduced to a new brand, is you want to test out their product line, and it's got to be a product that you feel comfortable in. Yeah. So with the ergonomics, with the sizing, with what you want to do in the sport, whether you're doing scrambling or you're riding mountain bikes or you're hiking a lot or you're having a casual cup of coffee or camping, if they have a product that really resonates with you, that's always a good thing. Like with Hoka, they have road shoes and trail shoes. I've done a lot of road marathons still. I do trail races. Hoka has a shoe for every type of running I do. So testing out the product first, being comfortable with it, liking it, and then engaging in a partnership with it. So you believe in the values, you believe in the product, you believe in the company and brand, you meet a lot of cool people in the industry. It's a win-win.
Yeah. And you got into Hoka when it was pretty new, right?
Yeah, 2014 was my first contract, except Nico, one of the co-founders of Hoka from France, he was already talking to me in like 2013.
Yeah.
And he sent me some of the prototypes. The first couple of prototypes was like, it was the Clifton 1, what ended up being the Clifton 1, which at first I was like, I knew like Carl Speedgoat had been running in like the Mafate, which weighed like a pound, literally 16-ounce shoe. And I was like, Hokas are a little heavy, but then they came out with the Clifton 1, and I was like, yeah, I could run in this.
Yeah, and I'm just like so curious about that growth, and and this is true curiosity because I'm sponsored by Brooks, and like I'm not trying to promote, but like your growth with Hoka is so fascinating, because when Hoka existed 10 years ago, I was in Santa Barbara where that it's owned by Decker, so that's where it is. And I was like, what are these clunky shoes? They look super goofy. And what was, like, you had to kind of take a risk, kind of cool. Like, did you like the shoes at first? And did they make road shoes then?
I did not like the original Mafate because it weighed a pound, but I did like the Clifton 1.
Yeah.
And that was a huge selling point. But yeah, it was right after they got acquired by Decker, so they were looking to take off. And I'd talk to guys like Carl. Yeah. Carl and Darcy were first sponsored, so like they're like the original U.S. team. I think even Jason Schlarb was on that original team.
Oh, nice.
And then quickly after that, it was like me and Magdalena, Mike Wardian, guys like that.
Yeah.
And then it just took off. So it was good timing.
Yeah, it's really crazy to see the evolution of. Do you wear? Oh yeah, you've got some of like their less maximal shoes on right now, huh? I don't know what that is.
It's a Torrent 3 trail shoe, yeah.
Because the progression has been from like clown shoes to like, shoes that like look really precise and cool.
Yeah.
It has been cool. And it's like clearly they're onto something, because the growth of the brand has just been incredible. So, now you're testing out some new product from Method 7, and how do you navigate, like, you said it with Camelback, you tried the product, you liked it, but that was an established brand, and with Hoka, like, that was a new concept and a new brand. Do you apply that risk taking with other relationships, or do you just solely go off like, I'm testing the product, I like it, I'm in?
A little bit of everything. Yeah, testing a product, liking it, liking the brand's mission, their values, like what they represent, meeting some people in the company. That's always to see if it's a good fit. It's kind of the process. But yeah, I take my time with it. So it's
How big of a factor is like the relationships that you work with on the day to day, knowing that they turn over sometimes?
On the day to day.
Yeah, like your athlete manager, say for.
Yeah, I mean, they're usually pretty busy with like all sorts of marketing initiatives.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it depends on I love interacting. I love interacting with the design team. I was a design major in college, actually, so I love talking product, especially like ergonomics. But it's cool to be an athlete and feel like you're kind of an extension of the marketing arm. But it's also cool to be kind of up to creating your own personality on social media while also promoting your brand, because it's aligned with your own values. So like if I want to do a funny TikTok dance video, or I want to do a attempted music video intro cover on Instagram or something, I'm going to do it. And in the process, I could wear sunglasses and my Hokas and clothing and all sorts of other sponsor gear. Yeah. And sometimes they like it, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. And you love making those videos.
I do. Yeah, I'd make them.
So
I'd make
cool.
them anyway.
And I think that's truly like why you're one of the reasons why you're so engaged with the community, like everybody knows Sage Canaday. And then second, why you've had these really long relationships. I have struggled with the social media side sometimes, and it does seem natural for you, and you make it look fun.
Thank you.
It's cool that it actually is fun for you.
Yeah, well, you're doing great with this podcast, so keep it up.
That's why I started the podcast, actually, because I was like, I need something else that where I can talk about the brands that I work with without being locked into just this tiny little screen. So what if you were racing canyons tomorrow? What would be in your pack? Like, what is the gear that you're using right now?
The 100K?
Yeah, sure.
I would definitely go with the full liter of water.
Yeah.
So I'd go with the Zephyr Pro vest that carries 2 soft flasks up front. And then I actually like to wear this waist pack too. I got it on right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I could put my phone in it, maybe an extra jacket. I probably don't need the jacket for tomorrow. But you could put, nutrition. I'll stuff it full of Spring Energy gels. So I have like my nutrition, salt tabs, maybe a bar. But yeah, definitely fully loaded with the drinks, and then at every aid station, I'm filling those soft flasks up to take a full liter away, because it's gonna be hot tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I would definitely be drinking quite a bit at the aid stations, not just plain water, but electrolyte fluid too. Yeah.
And let's run down the gear list. Like, what's some essentials that people who are racing tomorrow should not forget?
There's a gear requirement, isn't there, for?
Let's pretend it's not there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, like last year we were required to carry a jacket, I think. Mm-hmm. So that it helped to have the full vest, because I didn't want to stuff a jacket. And I started with a headlamp, and I stuffed a headlamp actually in this waist pack. Yeah. Because we had to carry a headlamp. Sometimes in a lot of races you have to carry a security blanket. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you race like UTMB, the Camelback Pro or the Zephyr Pro is perfect because it's 12 liters. Yeah. So you're stuffing in jacket, rain pants, hat, gloves. Again, probably don't need that tomorrow. But definitely the fluid capacity is key. Yeah. So full liter. You could either do that with a reservoir or like soft flasks up front, easy access. Mm-hmm. And then I usually carry quite a bit of gel nutrition on me specifically. Yeah. So the nutrition's huge. I mean, I'll lather up with like body or squirrel's nut butter. Yeah. The lubricant beforehand. Some people carry like, if you're lucky enough to have crew access, sometimes your crew could give you like a dry pair of socks or dry pair of shoes. That could be a huge game changer. Yeah. Sometimes you have to drink Coca-Cola out there when you hit a low point, or have like fruit or a candy bar or something. So always be prepared with that. Put Band-Aids on my nipples, the typical.
Yeah, don't forget the lube. Don't forget the Band-Aids. Cool. Well, before we open it up to Q&A, I have one question. What's like a secret thing that you're really proud of that, the audience who follows you and who knows you through the sport wouldn't know of?
Oh, I don't have very many secrets. I share everything on social media. I'm really proud that in college I won the conference 10K championship on the track because I was always a better cross-country runner. So we were always running like, not, I wouldn't say they're trail races, but it's cross-country. It's like golf courses and, 5 miles, 8K to 10K cross-country. I was running Division I on the East Coast at Cornell. And, coach never really considered me much of a track runner. He's like, well, I was already running marathons. He's like, the longer the better. But 10K on the track, I wasn't expected to win, but I won my senior year, won the 10K conference against much faster track runners. So I was really proud of that. But it was, 25 laps on a 400-meter track is pretty boring, actually.
Yeah. No, thanks. That is why I am trail running.
Well, you were quite a track runner in college, too.
Yeah, but it's about you. It's not about me today.
No, I know your times. She's fast. At the half mile.
Yep. That was 800.
Yeah.
But again, it's about you today, not me. So speaking of guys, we've got about 15 minutes left and we're going to open it up to Q&A. Anyone that asks a question today gets a Camelback pack, up to 10. We've got both male and female packs. So let's do it. Guy in the back.
You mentioned a lot about during the race.
Project.
You mentioned a lot about what to carry during the race, but after the race there's a lot of new products coming out. These inflatable trousers, and these Theraguns, and things that twitch your muscles. What do you recommend after a race to make sure that you're recovering properly?
Yep. So the question was post-race recovery. There's so many products for during the race, and a lot of things have been focused today on pre-race and during the race. What's your post-race recovery plan or product that you use?
I go straight for the beer. No, I do a lot of times. I really like fruit smoothies. Like, I think eating like blueberries is like one of the best superfoods you could get. Then obviously after that you want some protein too, but the antioxidants are huge. I put on full-length compression socks. I like to kick my feet up, but then not just lay around all night and drink beer. I walk around too because it's good to get the blood flowing a little. But definitely the compression gear. Some people like to soak. Definitely make sure you hydrate. Besides just beer, but like get in some electrolytes because you're gonna be massively dehydrated probably regardless. That and the antioxidants. So blueberries, fruits, any calories basically, because your body needs to start repairing itself. So you're gonna want to eat a decent amount of protein. But anything you could get in, anything that tastes good. You can indulge and enjoy, and then getting enough sleep is real key, I think, always. I don't have a lot of the fancy recovery stuff, honestly. If you like the massage guns, I think they're great. It promotes blood flow, so that's always good. Or, if someone else wants to give you a massage, that works too. But yeah, just relax, enjoy your accomplishment.
So beer and spouse massages, got it. All right.
There's a lot of questions.
He was
Yeah. So
I got an order.
Mine is a training question.
So
you're in the race, and all these things go sideways. It's really difficult. How do you train voluntarily to suffer in advance of involuntary suffering in a race?
Okay, so how to train to suffer. I love that one.
So yeah, it's a fine balance with your training plan and cycle because you don't want to overtrain or suffer too much. But I'd say generally as a running coach and developing running plans and my own experience, you have to do some really hard long runs in training at some point. So there's always a couple long runs in a training build where I'm willing to go out there and run race pace and maybe not take quite as many gels and almost risk bonking or getting... I don't try to intentionally get dehydrated, but I'll run right up to the wall, and sometimes I'll cross that wall. So you experience it in training, hard training runs, long runs where you actually speed up and try to negative split it with a ton of vertical. So that, and just experience doing consistent high mileage on tired legs, and realize that in training, when you're going into a big weekend long run, you're not tapering for it, right? You're going into it tired and you're still doing these long runs, and you hope that you suffer enough in some of those long runs in training that when you get to the race, the adrenaline carries you through and the aid stations carry you through. But it is a tough thing. Like, you'll hit lows in training and racing that are definitely hard. But I try to callous myself in some of those long runs in training, just not too many.
Yeah. I'm going to add to that and say two things. First, the long runs in training, I do that too. My best races have been where I've just like kind of killed myself in long runs. But again, few and far between. But the other thing that's, sometimes overlooked is how much you can learn from like a really hard and short workout, and just being comfortable in those like few minute intervals of just like pure suffering. And it's like, those hard intervals are like an acute suffering. It's different than the hard runs that you do in, and when you're running long, it's like a searing pain, and being comfortable with that has, again, like the 800 is really, 800 meters, I think, is like the most painful then. And I draw a lot in ultra running from the 800 meters. And people are like, that is a huge leap. And I'm like, it makes a lot of sense to me. They both hurt a lot, and I think that's not to be overlooked. And I know high mileage all the time sometimes is like a huge sacrifice for people who are, working full time and have families and a lot of other obligations. So don't discount the short 45-minute, really hard runs. And when you're in that interval, think about how you respond, and take that and apply it to longer distances too. And then think about that too. Like something I do with my athletes that I coach is I run them through visualization exercises where I'm like, okay, and now you're hurting. You're at this point at the race, there's this section. And, part of that I can do because I've raced a lot in the US, but, part of that I just like make stuff up, and it's really about what's in here, so like visualize, do what Sage said. I do that too, but also do the short stuff and don't discount that.
And then we had this guy, yeah.
This is sort of a two-part question. And what's your favorite book about running? And what's your favorite book? Just doesn't have to be.
Okay, favorite book running and favorite book not running.
That's a tough question. Probably the most influential book that I read was a training book, Jack Daniel's Distance Running Formula book. I read the first edition when it came out. I was probably like 14 years old when I read that, and now there's like 3 editions, but that was the most influential training book because it talked about everything, VO2 max, all the phases of training, different zones, and it blew my mind. It was more for 5K to marathon, but I apply it a lot to ultra marathon training too. Favorite book overall? Oh man, that's a really tough one. I'm trying to go non-running here. Maybe Lord of the Flies.
Oh, wow. I strictly read fantasy, and unless I'm doing coaching research, only fantasy. So my favorite book is Name of the Wind. It is. If you haven't read it, do it. All right. Who is next, Sage? You're paying attention.
I think you okay. We'll go with you. Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna stick with suffering for a second.
Yeah.
Do you have a mantra during a race, like when it gets really difficult, or what do you do in those hard moments in the race?
Yeah, the mantra's changed over the years. It changes during the race too sometimes, but usually it's just trying to like one step at a time, or just if you could run, that kind of thing. I'm more just breaking down the race into smaller sections and trying to figure out how soon I could get to the next aid station. And
Yeah.
if it's a distance that's pretty far, I just try to break it down to 1 mile at a time. But yeah.
Yeah, and the question was, do you have a mantra? Yeah, my mantra does change. I usually have something like blankly, not because I planned it, but because it's just what happened. It like plays like over and over in my mind. I think it's my way of coping. But my mindset when I go into races is it's not about the outcome, it's about the effort. And by that I mean like every single thing could go wrong at the race. You could DNF, you could like break an ankle, but like so what? It's really the only thing that you could do to mess up the race is to bow out when you don't have to. It's to not try your best and put it all out there. So like when I'm going into these races or when I'm like really hurting, I ask myself, like, is this possible? Like, am I actually suffering? Or like, is this possible? And the answer is yes, I'm suffering. But, there's two, if you say, yes, I'm suffering, you're succumbing to that. If you say, yes, this is possible, you can keep going. So like, it's about the effort. It's about what your best is on that day. And who cares what happened after that, And this is coming from someone who's like, I've DNF'd a lot because I've had like this, I broke my back and my hip in 2015 and like my career has been turbulent. And so like I've had to have that mindset of like, I don't care how it ends up. I just care what version of myself shows up on the start line.
I think
all right, you're next.
You were next, probably, maybe.
Question about problem solving in races. So when things start to go sideways, sort of like dehydration, maybe slow down, drink, right? Nutrition, slow down, eat. If you're cramping or when things get really hot, like if you're dealing with muscle spasms and stuff like that, what do you do to troubleshoot things that you don't encounter as often?
Yeah, so how to problem solve during a race, specifically, on conditions like tomorrow at Canyons 100K when it's going to be really hot, to solve things like cramping and dehydration.
Yeah, that's a tough one because cramping could happen for a variety of reasons. A lot of people think it's from dehydration, which it could be, electrolyte imbalance, but a lot of times it's caused by doing something your body wasn't trained to do. So like a lot of people at the Boston Marathon, they'll start too fast on the first downhill and they'll wreck their quads. Even at Western States here, there's a lot of downhill and people, you run too fast on a downhill too early in the race and then all of a sudden you get to the uphills and your quads are done. So it's you try to nip it in the bud. If you start feeling that slight tinge of discomfort, back off if you can. Once it happens, you're kind of in damage control and you will have to slow down, but realize that, it's an ultra. After 20 miles, you're probably going to have some sort of skeletal muscular pain. Sometimes stopping and stretching, depending on the problem, could help. Sometimes people just start massaging their quads or their calf or, try to stretch, and sometimes that could loosen things up. But if it's caused by sheer muscle failure, then I'd re-examine your training and pacing strategy.
Yeah.
But if it's caused by sodium loss, you could try to mitigate it too with nutrition and hydration. But
something to like a big red flag early on, and then I always make this mistake, and this is kind of how I've learned it, is like if you're, as Sage said, you're gonna, after 20 miles, like it's not gonna feel easy anymore. It might not be in the pain cave yet, but it's not gonna feel easy. Your legs are gonna be tired. However, dehydration can cause, worse muscle aches than should be normal. And that will happen before cramping. And a big thing that I see people do is not pay attention to themselves during the race. It's super exciting. There's so many external, there's a lot of energy out there and there's a lot of external feedback. And, you're also, external feedback includes what's on your watch. Am I making my splits? But again, ultimately, like that doesn't matter. What matters most is what you're feeling in your body. And like, you have to pay attention to that. So before cramping, will come like just, your muscles will be like, it hurts a little bit extra, and it's because like with dehydration, your muscles are like a little tighter, it's like a sponge. You pour water on it, it expands. So be in tune with yourself, don't get too distracted. Listening to music is great. And it's shown that perceived effort goes up when you listen to music. But your effort can go up and perceived effort goes down, but don't do that at the cost of ignoring red flags. So when I'm running anything over a 50K, I'm constantly evaluating what I need. I'll leave one aid station and already start thinking about what I'll need at the next. I saw that guy in the back first. You're next.
My question is also about post-race, but more the mental aspect. If you've trained a long time for a specific big event, and whether it goes successful or not, how do you deal with any kind of come down?
So how do you deal with the post-race come down? That's a great question, especially in ultra running. Go ahead, Sage.
Yeah, and it's real. I mean, even after the best race of my life, even if I, win and set a course record and achieved all my goals, there always is kind of a post-race blues letdown. And it's really interesting because you think you'd be on cloud nine, which I usually am, but there's always like a week or two after, there's kind of this little letdown because it's like you put all your energy training for months and months into this event and it was exciting and it went well or it didn't. And I think it's good to realize that kind of everyone experiences it, and it's kind of part of the natural process of the whole sport because it's like you sacrifice so much and then now it's over. I mean, part of the way I solve it is then I sign up for another race. But just being around, if you have a running group or some friends or someone that could relate to that, you could kind of cope with it together. And it's definitely hard if you had a bad race, if you got an injury and had to pull out, or you just, had a meltdown where you had a bad race and then you have the post-race blues. That's probably the really hard thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's tough to overcome that. I don't know. How do you overcome that bad race blues?
So especially in ultra running, you have to realize that a lot of that is hormonal, and this is my version of like logicking myself out of this. You've completely depleted yourself. It takes weeks to recover from that. So like that first week you're on this high because you can still feel it in your body. And then that second week, you're like, oh, I feel okay now. I'm walking. I feel sad. And the only thing that will make me happy is running. You're like, this race made me really happy. The only thing that will make me happy is getting back into that. And what I've seen that more than anything lead to overtraining and injury because, you like have this huge success. Then you're happy and you're sore for a week. And then you're sad. And part of that too, as I said, is hormonal. Like you've burned all of your, it was a serotonin dump, and then you have nothing left because your body's recovering. And then you're probably extra hungry too because your body's burning calories really quickly to try and recover. So I would try and, acknowledge what you're feeling, see that. And then also don't panic, really. And I say that because the way ultra runners panic is to do stupid shit, is to, sign up for a race 2 weeks later, is to run way more, and I think signing up for a race is great and creating a new goal is great, but you can't jump into it. And I think, acknowledging that it's there, acknowledging that a lot of it, I did this race in Mexico in October. It took me almost 37 hours. I ran through 2 nights and I emotionally was weird for 3 weeks because I could feel things not firing quite in the same way. And my gut reaction was to be like, running makes me happy. But because, my feet still had skin peeling off, I knew it's not time yet, and I need you to it's so important to respect that time because that is how you're going to get burnt out is by reacting when you feel that way. So as Sage said, reach out to friends, sign up for a race, but don't do it in 3 weeks, don't search for that next high, that is addiction, and we all, ultra runners have addictive personalities. I definitely do. So, and I've done that before. So just try and avoid that cycle, and you'll be good.
Yeah, I try hobbies that I don't have time for usually, like playing the guitar. It's when the music videos come out.
Yeah,
it's on the break. Yeah. Other activities you usually don't do.
Yeah,
to distract yourself with.
Yeah. I also love walking. I found that when I'm after an ultra, when I'm feeling less sore, I love to go on long walks and hikes. And it gives me a lot of that same joy that a training run does without, I'm extremely competitive. So that's what I get out of racing and training. But the walks give me the same joy as my day-to-day run and really help, even me out from my emotional roller coaster. Cool.
You've mentioned you enjoy the traveling component of being an ultra runner and an elite athlete, and you mentioned Killian a couple of times. right now he's talking a lot about reducing their carbon footprint. So I was interested to understand what your point.
Yeah. Well, so the question was, how do you negate the environmental impact of all the travel we do? And that's a great question. And one I really think about every time I get on a plane. Every time I travel, it is for running. And I do travel a lot. Something really easy that I do is I work with multiple different companies. One is called Moss, that every single time I fly, it offsets my travel. So with, carbon. So anyone can do that. It's a great company. It's growing. Like if you're a business owner, you can connect your whole company and your whole company's travel does that. For just me, I pay like a monthly fee to do it. And then every month it does that. But it's a really good question and something that, I do struggle with. I try and be better in my day-to-day to reduce other impacts to hopefully make up for that. And I try and be mindful. But it is a hard thing with this lifestyle. And I really respect Killian for not for reducing his travel a lot. And for me, like, it's A, something I love, and B, it's part of these brand relationships that I have. So when I am committing to these sponsorship opportunities that I have in different parts of the country and the world, I always make first, Moss is automatic. I upload my flight, it offsets it, plus the monthly fee that all goes. So that's a great company. But I am really intentional about trying to do, about knowing what it is, recognizing what it is, encouraging the companies that I work with to also negate that travel with a carbon offset. And then something else that I've been doing, I haven't done it the last few flights because I've been so busy, but collecting your trash that you accumulate during your flight is really mind-blowing. I started doing it when I was running for Solomon, when I was living in Colorado, going to Utah a lot. And just on that's an hour-long flight. And I would accumulate so much trash, and just being aware of that. And I think awareness is everything when it comes to reducing your impact, because when you can see like, oh my God, this is a lot of trash, it just helps reduce it.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is something I struggle with, especially I think Killian's been leading the charge of that, as well as other ultra runners, especially in Europe, where a lot of times they could take trains to races across countries. It's rail travel is a lot more efficient over there. But yeah, I realize at some level I'm probably kind of a hypocrite. We do travel. Since we're traveling, it's kind of like travel for work, but it is the carbon footprint from flying is definitely my biggest impact, I'd say, by far, and I know it's a lot. Like Kat, I've done some carbon offsets in the past. Our coaching company is actually a member of 1% for the Planet, so we donate a lot to charities and environmental issues for that. And then aligning with companies like Camelback, that I know they've made a big push with sustainability and a lot of their product designs with reusing materials. But yeah, it's definitely... I haven't been traveling as much. I'd say I'm not going to, at least this year, on like those long haul flights, because they are quite costly.
Yeah.
But it's something we all kind of struggle with. I'd say it's a constant thing.
That's a really good point, though, with brand relationships. Thank you for that, Sage. That's something that I evaluate when I'm partnering with a brand too, or even just buying something. And, it is kind of like, is this like when I'm buying something, a marketing thing? But, when partnering with Camelback or Brooks or Method 7, like each of them had environmental initiatives that we talked about before I signed a contract. And that goes for like buying product too, find out where, and food is a great, the biggest thing that I look at is like, where is it coming from? There's such a disconnect with food, and by just knowing where your food comes from, you can reduce that impact. All right, question. I know you had your hand raised.
So a bit of a follow-on for the ecology of it. The sport is growing, right? We've got more people, but more people on trails tends to create bottlenecks, right? so it can also cause more erosion on the trail. How do you see the evolution of the sport go? And it has a lot of ramifications, I think, because we were talking also like don't go too fast. I think a lot of people go out because they're trying to get ahead of like who's trapped in the pack. Might not apply as much to you guys, but Western States as well has a limit, right? 390 people, like tops. Do you see that as the future of trail racing? Like there's going to be these hard limits, or do you see like the solution maybe is to stagger them out more like road races do, where they give you like, you stand here if you're going to do like a 6-minute mile, 7-minute mile, and so on, so that people sort of flow more fluidly.
Yeah. So the question was, especially, I'm assuming in North America, the impact of the sport growing on trails, not only for erosion, but also for bottleneck trails when you're racing, which is a great question because it's something, Sage might not deal with it, but as a female, even a female elite athlete, it's something that I do have to think about every single race. Go ahead, Sage.
Yeah, I think the staggering is probably the answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the complete answer, but I think as more timing systems get more advanced, we see more chip timing, chip mats, people will be able to track different start times better, that if they stagger the race according to people's projected finishing time, it would thin out the crowds at the start, allow for a better experience, and create less traffic jams for sure.
Yeah, I also think, I think hopefully staggering is something that's implemented in racing. I also think, in North America, capping the amount of people that race is a great point. In Europe, for that reason, they don't allow pacers, so all these people can go race on this course, which does have a huge impact. I also hope that with the increase in sport, there are more initiatives by brands and by the government to maintain the trails. That's something really amazing that I've noticed with European trail running. It's like pristine trails everywhere. All these races are on, not to say they're not technical, but they're extremely well maintained. And part of that is erosion, it's erosion management. And I hope that with the growth of the sport, there's more attention on the trails because, you think about all these races in the United States and so much of them, so much of the trails are maintained by the community just because they love them and they love to use them. And there's not that, there is some, depending on where you are, but there's not a huge amount of money spent on even recognizing the erosion in the area. So I hope with the growth of the sport, also comes growth in budget for not only brands to get involved, for people to get involved, but also hopefully, the government to get involved as this sport becomes more popular.
Yeah, there could be more initiatives too, I think, with rewarding people that volunteer more with trail work initiatives. So like, a lot of races you have to put in some volunteer hours, but if you put in extra volunteer hours, you're, crewing at aid stations a lot, helping maintain the trails, a lot like mountain bike culture.
Yeah.
You might get like an extra lottery ticket, and so your odds get better of getting into the race, and it helps with the sustainability aspect too.
And there are some races that are doing that right now. Like I know Leadville's one. If you do trail work, you do get more lottery tickets. And because I think the lottery structure is, it's difficult, but it's good because it keeps people off the trails, at least when they're not being worked on. So I think that's a great point.
I have a question about recurring injuries, if you've ever had them, and how do you believe in like injury management, like making sure you don't get injured, or if you have a recurring injury, how do you like mentally deal with that? Do you do any cross training?
Yeah.
What do you do with a recurring injury?
So the question was, how do you deal with reoccurring injury? And do you work through the reoccurring injury? Do you cross train? Do you use cross training and training? So as someone who is chronically dealing with a lot of injury from an accident, you have to, and I would do this anyway because this injury from my accident has manifested in a ton of different ways. But, every time you run, there's the simplest answer is that there's, 3 things to look out for. If the injury is so bad that it gets worse throughout the run. You are thinking about it every step of the run, or if it's way worse after you run, shut it down. You are injured. You need to address it. However, as someone, I've been managing injury for since 2015. I got hit by a UPS truck, and it's been can I run today? And there is such thing as working through pain. And even if you didn't get hit by a UPS truck, running hurts, every single day. And my college coach said this, if something doesn't hurt, you're not doing it right, and you're always going to be have a wonky hip or have a wonky knee. And there's a point where you are managing, and that's okay. And depending on who you are and what you respond to, some people manage by supplementing 30% of their volume with cross training. Some people are okay, I'm going to do PT these days a week. I know these exercises help. Plus, body work once a month, and you just have to find your formula. But I personally believe that in running, there is a degree of management before it becomes an injury. And it is just a constant evaluation. And you got to know yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. Man, this does feel worse today because I ran yesterday, even if it's a little bit worse. You don't have to shut it down for long, but a little bit, but that's when what I call a niggle becomes an injury, is when it's worse when you run, or you think about it every single step, and not a way I'm focusing on it so it doesn't hurt, in a way this is taking away from this experience.
Yeah, I'll just add what she said, but it really depends on exactly the type of injury, the severity of the injury, if it's a chronic overuse thing. And then, getting the proper medical diagnosis is key. You might have to get a couple referrals to a couple PTs because the quality of PT matters, the quality of the image matters. So, if it's a serious injury and they don't see it in an x-ray, they might need to do an MRI. And it's better to have that accurate diagnosis right off the bat first, so you could start treating it right away with a good PT. And then ideally after that, you're always doing preventative stuff, whether it's you need more strength in your core or hip area or your quad area or something like that, really specific. And then, rotating out your shoes too, making sure you're in a proper fitting shoe, a proper cushion shoe that works with your biomechanics is really key.
Yeah. And I will also say, if in your gut, the PT is saying something and you're there are really, really amazing PTs out there. There's also PTs that don't understand runners, and if your PT in your gut, if it feels really, or doctor, it feels almost too prescriptive. I'm going to wait. Right by the fire station. If your PT or doctor gives you treatment that feels too prescriptive and your symptoms don't feel like they're being taken in account, it's okay to get a second opinion, And for me, through these last 8 years or so trying to figure out this injury, I have only known a few PTs that I feel actually listen. So listen to your gut. There are good people out there, and it's sometimes just a good person for you. It's not necessarily good or bad. All right, maybe one more question.
This one's for Sage. Are you going to run another road marathon, do you think? Maybe possibly CIM?
Oh, yeah. So the question is, am I going to run another road marathon? Definitely. Yeah, I'd love to run another road marathon. I haven't decided yet because I know I'm going to do some trail mountain ultras this year, and I try not to mix those too close to the road marathons, despite any service, any distance. But I'd love to try to do maybe a small town marathon, actually. You're talking about doing a local race or something, because every marathon I've done has been a pretty big marathon. I've done Boston, New York, Chicago. I think it would be really cool to actually just go and do a really small town local marathon. And try to run fast, but also just enjoy that atmosphere. So I haven't decided yet, but
I have
probably
a question
something
for you.
close by.
Yeah. So do you think doing a small local race versus a big giant race will have any impact on your race mentality, and not saying like performance, but I'm saying like sometimes like I perform better when I'm the underdog, you know. How about you? Like, do you think it will?
You definitely, to some extent, yeah. Because a lot of times, if it's kind of like, I don't want to say under the radar, but if it's a low key local event and like, it's the competitive depth might not be the same. There's kind of just less pressure.
Yeah.
So you could sit back, enjoy the experience, still run hard, still challenge yourself, but maybe film some with a GoPro. I don't know.
Yeah. And run like what, a 2:19?
I don't know. I could try. Yeah, I'd love to get back to road marathons. Any service, any distance.
Cool. Well, unless we have another pressing question, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you, Sage, for being our first live guest, and to listeners, thanks for listening to the BeRad podcast. Woo! Yeah. We're out.
Thank you.
Woohoo! Thanks, guys.
For coming out. Really
Thank you.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, cool. Oh yeah. What do you want for the backdrop?
Traffic or table?